The camera starts rolling before dawn, breath fogging the lens as the siblings stand apart. Their trip is framed as reconciliation, yet the unspoken motive is documentation, proof for themselves, and leverage if promises resurface. Their mother's absence is explained with rehearsed calm, a cruise paid by a consulting contract she won months earlier. The siblings agree to film everything, partly nostalgia, partly insurance against selective memory and future disputes. They board with an agreement to keep emotions off camera, yet the lens lingers on hands shaking. 15 years of silence has a price, and travel receipts feel cheaper than confronting what was withheld. A rival trades steel for soil, the farmhouse rising like a held breath. The greeting is warm, practiced, and oddly timed, as if rehearsed for a home appraisal rather than a family reunion. Hugs happen quickly, the camera politely angled away. The older pair speak of volunteer shifts and cancelled routes, details offered like invoices, hoping numbers alone establish credibility. Inside, the house smells of disinfectant and sugar, a curious pairing. The male sibling narrates room dimensions like a surveyor, noting fixtures, locks, and the staircase that creaks exactly once. Their guest room used to be their mother's, or so they're told. The explanation includes tax years and renovations, as if provenance might substitute for trust. Rules arrive with tea, no basement due to mold liability, lights out by 9:30 to protect sleep schedules. The phrasing sounds like legal counsel, not concern. Daylight brings permission to roam, a generosity that feels staged. The siblings document fence lines and sheds, noting padlocks that appear new against old wood. At lunch, the older woman laughs too loudly at nothing, then apologizes for a spill she didn't make. The camera catches the apology, not the absence of the accident. Night falls with sudden discipline, clocks chiming in chorus. Hunger pushes the female sibling downstairs, her steps careful, lens low, recording to prove she followed the rules. She freezes as movement stutters across the hallway, a figure pacing without destination. The sound of retching echoes, methodical, like maintenance rather than illness. Back upstairs, the footage is replayed in silence. They decide not to wake anyone, choosing evidence over confrontation, a habit learned from watching contracts collapse politely. Morning explanations arrive prepackaged, stomach bug, nothing more. The reminder about curfew lands heavier this time, as if penalties are implied but undisclosed. They explore the crawlspace for airflow, the camera ducking under beams. The female sibling jokes to steady herself, then stops when footsteps above align too precisely. A sudden rush sends dust swirling as the older woman appears at the entrance, faster than expected. Sunlight saves the moment, laughter reframing fear as a prank. A stranger knocks later, asking about missed volunteer hours and grant reporting. The siblings note the language, institutional, and the way the house suddenly empties. They tour town with forced cheer, the older man scanning reflections like ledgers. Paranoia erupts at a passerby, then collapses into an apology priced too cheaply. That night, scratching rakes the hallway door at a precise minute. The siblings film, hands trembling, learning that time here is enforced, not measured. When the door opens a crack, what waits isn't explanation but ritual. They shut it fast, agreeing without words that documentation has become defense. Morning resets the house without apology, breakfast laid out like compensation. The older woman mentions insurance premiums rising, a stray comment that frames the night as an actuarial inconvenience. Morning resets the house without apology, breakfast laid out like compensation. The older woman mentions insurance premiums rising, a stray comment that frames the night as an actuarial inconvenience. The siblings report oddities with restraint, choosing neutral language. They've learned that extraordinary claims depreciate without footage, especially when elders are involved. An interview is proposed, framed as family history. The older woman agrees too quickly, posture rigid, eyes fixed as if awaiting cross-examination. Questions warm the room until the past is named. The response fractures, hands trembling, breath stuttering, the narrative dissolving into noise. Night resumes its schedule earlier than expected, sounds ricocheting off doors. Movement flashes past twice, purposeful, then gone, like a system test. At dawn, a well draws attention with theatrical stillness. They lower a bucket for answers, retrieving only water and the feeling of being watched. A neighbor arrives bearing pastries and gratitude for past help at a facility. The siblings note the phrasing, service hours, compliance, gratitude quantified. Laughter echoes from the living room, unprompted and sustained. The camera finds the older woman rocking, facing a blank wall as if content requires none. The shed offers inventory, tools, locks, and a corner stacked with used medical supplies. The male sibling records carefully, narrating facts without adjectives. He stumbles upon the older man alone, a weapon posed like punctuation. The moment is framed as stress, the explanation invoiced later. They install a hidden camera to reconcile contradictions. Surveillance becomes a family project, justified as safety rather than suspicion. Sleep arrives late, thin and transactional. Downstairs, the lens captures doors opening and closing like accounts being reconciled after hours. The footage escalates, a knife lifted with intention. The siblings wake to pounding and choose stillness, betting on silence as a hedge. Morning brings evidence they can't unsee. The plan becomes avoidance until extraction, daylight as collateral. 39249. They scrub the lens clean, restoring sight and leverage. Visibility returns with urgency, and the call reconnects faces to fear. Truth lands hard when seen, not told. The voice on the other end recognizes strangers instantly, the cost of denial suddenly due. Emergency services are contacted, instructions clipped and urgent. The house seems to sense the call, footsteps converging. Outside, an argument erupts between the older pair and the neighbor. Words like compliance and reports float before the shouting peaks. Outside, an argument erupts between the older pair and the neighbor. Words like compliance and reports float before the shouting peaks. A game night is proposed with forced cheer, teams pre-assigned. The language pits age against youth, ownership against trespass. Excuses by seconds, then minutes. The female sibling slips away, framing her departure as content creation. Alone at the table, the male sibling feels the room tilt. Cake is consumed with unsettling precision, as if calories are being accounted for. The older man rises and returns changed, the air tightening. A freeze follows, a switch flipped somewhere. In the basement, the truth waits among dumpsters and paperwork. The facility names surfaces, linking visits, grants, and a long con. Photographs confirm identity theft paid for with blood. The real caretakers were eliminated to assume access, housing, and stipend. Confrontation arrives from behind, calm and explanatory. The scheme is outlined like a prospectus, risks minimized, benefits immediate. The female sibling is locked away, the older woman pacing with predatory patience. Survival becomes improvisation. Downstairs, humiliation is weaponized, meant to break resolve. The male sibling steadies himself, eyes tracking exits. The chase erupts upstairs, mirrors shattering into options. Pain sharpens focus, turning debris into tools. A shard ends the pursuit, consequence immediate and final. Silence replaces laughter, the ledger closed. In the kitchen, the remaining threat advances. Desperation meets timing as the siblings reunite. Metal slams end the struggle, repeated until movement stops. The cost is paid in bruises and breath. Sirens arrive as promised, blue and red slicing the dark. Relief is cautious, earned. Statements follow, footage submitted, timelines reconciled. Institutions respond when evidence is organized. The house is sealed, assets frozen pending investigation. What was stolen won't return, but exploitation ends. Paperwork concludes the night, signatures steady despite shaking hands. Closure arrives through procedure. They leave before dawn, carrying footage heavier than luggage. Silence finally feels safe. Months later, restitution hearings convert terror into records. The siblings testify once, clearly. The footage is archived, then released as warning. Trust, they learn, survives best when documented. The investigation widens beyond the house, tracing volunteer logs and stipends. Paper trails reveal how credibility was leveraged like collateral, exchanged for housing access and monthly reimbursements no one audited closely. Bank statements surface, modest sums repeated with clockwork precision. It wasn't greed that sustained the scheme, but predictability, a low-risk income stream hidden behind benevolent appearances. Insurance adjusters walk the farmhouse, measuring damage and documenting evidence. Every photograph converts chaos into claimable facts, translating fear into categories with deductibles and limits. The siblings attend a briefing, learning how liability shifts when imposters occupy a property. The law recognizes harm even when victims survive, assigning value to disruption and risk. Restitution is proposed, not as comfort, but as closure. Funds will support counseling, relocation costs, and a trust to prevent future exploitation of volunteer programs. Media interest flares and fades, the story resisting sensational framing. What remains compelling is the method, documentation over instinct, evidence over denial. At home, editing resumes with restraint. Cuts prioritize clarity, preserving timestamps and context so viewers understand how systems fail quietly, not suddenly. A legal advisor reviews the cut, flagging defamation risks and privacy concerns. Compliance becomes creative constraint, shaping a release that informs without inviting litigation. Revenue projections are modest, intentionally so. Monetization is capped, sponsorships declined, the goal credibility rather than yield, knowing trust compounds slower but lasts longer. Community organizations request screenings, pairing the film with training sessions. Grants are allocated for safeguards, transforming a personal ordeal into preventive infrastructure. The farmhouse is sold at auction, disclosed history included. Transparency depresses price but accelerates sale, a market correction that favors honesty over concealment. Proceeds fund victim services first, creditors second. The order matters, signaling priorities beyond balance sheets. Regulators update volunteer vetting protocols, adding cross-checks and rotation audits. The fix is unglamorous, effective precisely because it's boring. The siblings revisit the footage once more, privately. Fear has cooled into perspective, the image is now instructional rather than invasive. They choose not to return to the property, resisting symbolic closure. Healing, they decide, doesn't require reenactment. Donations arrive after release, unsolicited and earmarked. Each is logged publicly, reinforcing the ethic that transparency is protection. A follow-up cut adds context requested by viewers. The update clarifies warning signs without dramatization, respecting intelligence over shock. Institutions acknowledge failure in measured statements. Apologies lack poetry, but policy changes endure longer than words. The channel's audience grows slowly, then steadies. Engagement favors long watch time over spikes, aligning incentives with depth. A final screening closes the chapter, applause brief and sincere. The work stands without encore. Months later, the siblings sign off on the trust's annual report. Numbers align with intent, a quiet success. They archive raw footage securely, access restricted. Some stories serve best when preserved, not replayed. They archive raw footage securely, access restricted. Some stories serve best when preserved, not replayed. The siblings resume ordinary routines, work calls replacing crisis. Normalcy feels earned, not assumed. They decline a dramatization offer, wary of dilution. The choice trades short-term profit for long-term integrity. Training materials circulate nationally, citing their case anonymously. Impact scales best when ego steps aside. An audit confirms compliance improvements across facilities. Metrics shift, incidents drop, progress measured rather than proclaimed. They record a brief epilogue, voices steady. The message is simple: document, verify, and don't ignore unease. Comments slow, then settle into gratitude. The internet moves on, but lessons remain indexed. A calendar flips, marking distance from the event. Time doesn't erase facts, it contextualizes them. They store the camera, no longer a shield but a tool. Its presence no longer tightens their shoulders. A final report closes the case officially. Accountability arrives without spectacle. They revisit the station where it began, not to film, just to breathe. Movement forward feels deliberate now. The past is acknowledged, not indulged. Silence becomes a choice rather than a rule. Their story settles into archives and policy footnotes. That's enough. Viewers apply lessons locally, reporting irregularities. Small actions ripple outward. The siblings agree the work changed them. Vigilance, they learn, is compassion with structure. They close the chapter without ceremony. Life resumes at an honest pace. The footage ends where trust begins again, earned, documented, and shared responsibly. The system learned because someone pressed record.